The human stepped off the shuttle with a sense of unease. The city stretched before him like a dream, tall spires shimmering in colors he had never seen on Earth. He had been trained for diplomacy, but nothing in his lessons could have prepared him for the alien world of the Queen. Everything smelled metallic, yet oddly sweet, and the air hummed softly with some kind of energy that made his hair tingle. He adjusted the sleeve of his uniform and reminded himself why he was here. He was just a simple diplomat sent to negotiate trade agreements, but somehow, the universe had chosen him to face one of its most mysterious rulers. His people had warned him. The alien empire was not like humans. They were logical, efficient, and cold in ways humans could barely understand. Humor might save him, or it might doom him. He was led through a series of corridors that seemed to shift subtly, as if the palace itself were alive. The guards were tall, with translucent skin and eyes that glowed faintly. They did not speak, only observed him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. He forced himself to smile and nodded politely. Finally, they arrived at a large chamber. The ceiling was impossibly high, and a soft, golden light bathed the room. At the far end, the alien queen sat on her throne, her presence commanding attention without effort. She was beautiful in a way that seemed both unreal and intimidating. Her skin shimmered like mother of pearl, and her eyes were the color of a calm galaxy, endless and deep. "Welcome, human," she said. Her voice was melodic but carried a weight that made him straighten immediately. "I thank you, your majesty," he stammered. He had prepared a speech, practiced it over and over, but standing in front of her, it all seemed useless. The queen studied him for a long moment. He felt exposed, as if she could see every thought flickering in his mind. Finally, she gestured for him to sit. He lowered himself onto the chair, trying to hide his nervousness. He could feel the eyes of the court upon him. Many advisors, their features sharp and angular, watched silently from the edges of the chamber. He had expected a formal negotiation, but he had not expected the weight of history pressing down so heavily in the room. The conversation began with protocols and formalities. He spoke carefully, presenting his proposals, and she responded with logical questions that tested his reasoning. Every answer required precision, every word measured. He noticed that when he hesitated, her eyes flickered slightly, but she said nothing. It was both terrifying and fascinating. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed different in this place. He made a small joke to lighten the tension, something he would have said casually on Earth. "If you weren't already ruling an empire, you'd make a cute wife," he added with a nervous laugh. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then, to his horror, the queen froze. Her eyes widened just slightly, and the advisors leaned forward in shock. The human laughed awkwardly, thinking perhaps she had not understood the joke. I was just joking," he said, trying to backpedal, but the queen's voice came calm and deliberate. "I accept." The human blinked. The words hung in the air like a solid object. He could see the court muttering among themselves, faces filled with disbelief and confusion. He had never expected a response like this. What?" he stammered. "I accept," she repeated. Her eyes locked onto his, and for the first time he noticed a flicker of curiosity, something almost human in her gaze. "You have spoken the bond aloud. It is binding." He wanted to protest, to explain, but the words seemed to vanish. In this culture, spoken intentions carried power. He had made a joke, yes, but now it was interpreted as a formal proposal, and the law, or something close to law, recognized it. The court erupted into whispers. Advisors argued quietly, and some moved to stand, but the queen's gesture froze them. No one dared speak further. The human realized that he was being treated differently now. He was no longer just a diplomat. He was bound, however unexpectedly, to the ruler of this alien world. For the rest of the day, he was escorted through the palace under careful watch. Servants offered food, advisors asked questions, and he answered cautiously. Each time he tried to explain that his words had been a joke, the queen merely observed quietly, as if she were studying him rather than reacting with anger. By the evening, he found himself in a small but elegant room prepared for him. The furniture was strange but comfortable, designed for her species, yet it accommodated him surprisingly well. A window showed the alien city below, lights shimmering like stars scattered across a dark sea. He sat on the edge of the bed, running his hands through his hair. How had a single careless joke changed everything? He thought about his family back on Earth, about how they would never believe this. A laugh escaped him, shaky and nervous. He was supposed to negotiate trade agreements, not marry an alien queen by accident. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. The queen entered, graceful and silent. She wore a robe of deep blue, patterned with silver that reflected the light like a galaxy. He stood immediately, but she waved him down. "You are uncomfortable," she stated, not as a question but as an observation. Yes," he admitted. "I did not mean to. You spoke and it was received," she said. "In my world, words matter. Intent is secondary." He nodded, unsure whether to feel relief or dread. "So, what happens now?" he asked. "Now you remain under my protection," she said. "You will not leave. You will be observed and we will learn from each other." He swallowed. That was more than he had expected, but there was no anger in her voice, no threat. Just calm, logic, and a hint of curiosity. Over the next few days, he began to understand more about her world. Every action was deliberate, every gesture meaningful. The court watched him constantly, yet the queen herself seemed to test him in quiet ways. She asked questions about human life, about humor, about emotions. Each time, he answered honestly, and she listened. One evening, as they walked through a garden filled with glowing plants, she asked a question he had never expected. "Do humans always speak without thinking?" He chuckled nervously. "Not always, but sometimes yes, especially when they are nervous or trying to make others comfortable." She considered this. "Interesting. Your species values spontaneity and emotion over precision. It is chaotic yet compelling." He laughed, relieved at her fascination rather than anger. "I guess that's one way to put it." She smiled slightly, the first real smile he had seen from her. It was faint, almost imperceptible, yet it made the human's chest tighten. There was something alive behind her eyes, something he could not fully understand, and yet he felt connected. Despite the absurdity of the situation, he realized he was curious about her too. This queen, so powerful and controlled, had never encountered anyone like him. He wondered if, in some way, she had accepted the joke because she wanted to see the human spirit, the unpredictability, the humor, the warmth that humans carried despite their smallness in the universe. As days passed, he began to see subtle changes. The queen would linger in conversation longer than needed. She would watch him perform small human habits, laughing at a story, frowning at a minor inconvenience, and sometimes she mimicked them silently, studying them with intensity. The human, meanwhile, tried not to let his anxiety show. He explored the palace carefully, learning the routines of the guards, the servants, and the court. He wrote notes to himself about the alien customs, but the most important lesson he learned was this: survive by being human. His humor, his warmth, and his honesty were his strengths, and perhaps in this world they might be revolutionary. Then one morning, as he stood on a balcony watching the twin suns rise, the queen appeared behind him. "You are learning quickly," she said, her voice soft. "You adapt in ways I did not expect." He turned, startled by the compliment. I try." "You do more than try," she said. "You are remarkable. It is not your strength that is surprising, but your courage and your heart." He felt a flush on his face. "I thank you, Your Majesty." She nodded and then turned her gaze to the city below. "Soon others will notice. You will be tested. And when they challenge you, they will find that humans are different." He followed her gaze and saw the sprawling city, the towers and streets humming with life. Somewhere in that vastness, the world was beginning to change, because a single joke had started a chain of events no one could have predicted. And somewhere, he realized, he was no longer just a diplomat. He was part of something bigger, something that could change the alien empire forever, simply by being human. Days turned into weeks, and the human began to settle into the rhythms of the alien palace. The initial shock of his accidental proposal had faded slightly, replaced by a strange mix of curiosity and caution. He had learned quickly that the queen's attention was both a privilege and a responsibility. Every action, every word was observed carefully, and any misstep could cause confusion or offense. Yet despite the tension, he felt a growing sense of purpose. He was no longer just a visitor. He was becoming a participant in the life of the alien empire. Each morning he would meet with the queen in her study, a vast room filled with floating displays and glowing symbols. She asked him questions about Earth, about humans, about the simplest things he had taken for granted. Why did humans smile when they were nervous? Why did they laugh at things that were not funny to others? Why did they act without thinking sometimes, even when it could cause trouble? He answered honestly, feeling as if every answer built a bridge between them. One morning, she asked a question that made him pause. "Do humans always act impulsively?" she asked, her voice calm, almost like she was reasoning with herself rather than him. "Not always," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But humans are curious. We act on what we feel, sometimes without thinking, because we want to learn. We want to connect. That's how we survive in a way." She considered this quietly, her eyes distant. Curiosity, connection, survival. These concepts are not common in my world. Logic and order are prized above all else. Yet, I see something in you. Something that challenges my understanding. The human felt a warmth spread through him. It was the first time the queen had expressed something personal, something beyond observation. He realized she was not only learning about him, she was learning about herself through him. Over the following days, he began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. She would linger in the study longer than needed, watching him as he explained trivial human habits or told a story from his childhood. When he laughed at a memory, she would tilt her head slightly, mimicking his expression, almost as if she were trying to feel what he felt. The human found it fascinating and, in some ways, comforting. Here was the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, and yet she was quietly discovering humanity for the first time. It was not all easy. The court had grown restless. Many advisors whispered among themselves, their faces showing a mixture of fear, disbelief, and curiosity. A human had never been so close to the queen, let alone bound to her by words, even if accidental. Some tried to manipulate the situation, suggesting that the human be removed, that he was a distraction or a liability. But the queen had begun to defend him, her reasoning both clear and firm. "He is not a threat," she stated one day in council. "He is unique. We will observe him and we will learn." Her words carried weight and no one dared argue further. One afternoon, while walking through the palace gardens, the human noticed a small, glowing plant he had never seen before. He bent down, studying it, and accidentally brushed his fingers against its petals. The plant shimmered in response, and the queen stopped beside him. "You interact with your environment differently," she said. "You touch, you observe, you learn. You are not afraid of the unknown." "I guess I just like to understand things," he replied, standing up. "I think humans feel safer when we know more, even if it seems strange to others." She nodded, her eyes following his every movement. "You are brave," she said softly, "not with weapons or strategy, but with your mind and your heart." The human felt a mixture of pride and embarrassment. Praise from a ruler was not something he had expected, especially not in such a personal way. He realized that the queen was beginning to see him not just as a human, but as an individual. And perhaps, for the first time, he was beginning to see her as more than a queen. The palace staff had grown used to his presence, though they remained cautious. Some of the guards who had once regarded him with suspicion now treated him with a quiet respect. He learned the names of a few servants and exchanged simple greetings with them, finding that even in this alien world, kindness could cross boundaries. The queen noticed, and sometimes she would watch these interactions with an intensity that made him self-conscious. One evening, the human found himself invited to dine with the queen alone. The meal was simple by alien standards: fresh fruits, glowing grains, and a kind of protein he had never tasted before. They ate in silence at first, the only sounds the quiet hum of the palace and the occasional soft clink of utensils. After a moment, he ventured a question. "Do you ever feel lonely?" The queen paused, her eyes distant. "Loneliness is a human concept," she said. "I have duties. I have advisors, I have the empire. Yet perhaps there is a type of emptiness when one has no equals, no companions who understand them fully." He nodded slowly. "I understand that. On Earth, I often felt out of place, like no one really understood me. But then I learned that finding even one person who listens, that can make all the difference." She studied him for a long moment. "Perhaps that is why I accepted your words," she said finally. "Not because of the words themselves, but because of what they revealed. You are human, and human courage is unusual." The human felt a flutter of surprise. He had joked, he had stumbled, and yet somehow it had opened a door. He realized that the queen's acceptance was not only about law or culture, it was about something deeper. She was drawn to his authenticity, his ability to be human in a way that challenged her understanding of the universe. As days turned into weeks, their bond grew quietly. He taught her small things about humor, about human emotions, about the simple pleasures of life. She listened, absorbing everything, asking questions, and occasionally trying to mimic his expressions or gestures. He found himself laughing at her attempts, and she would correct herself with a faint smile, clearly enjoying the process. Yet the political reality of the situation remained. The council was not idle. Advisors continued to discuss strategies, some subtly warning the queen about the dangers of human influence. They suggested alliances, treaties, and manipulations, but she dismissed most of their advice. "The human is not a pawn," she declared one day in council. "He is a teacher in his own right. Observe him, learn from him, but do not manipulate him." The human overheard some of these conversations and felt a strange sense of responsibility. He was not trained for politics on this scale, yet he understood something important. The queen valued honesty, curiosity, and courage above all else. His own strengths, his warmth, his empathy, his humor, were perhaps more valuable here than any weapon or negotiation tactic. One afternoon, while exploring a quiet wing of the palace, he discovered a small room filled with holographic records of the empire's history. He watched images of battles, treaties, celebrations, and ceremonies. The scale of the empire was overwhelming, yet he could see a pattern. Logic and order had always ruled, and emotion had rarely influenced decision-making. He realized that his presence here, small as it seemed, was a subtle disruption of that pattern. The queen entered quietly behind him. "You understand our history," she said. "Do you see what is missing?" I see that you value control above all," he said carefully. "Order, law, efficiency, but maybe not choice, maybe not emotion." She studied him silently. "Perhaps, and yet you are different. You act with feeling, you act with intent. Even when you make mistakes, your choices carry meaning." He smiled faintly. "I guess that's just being human." Her eyes softened slightly. "Yes, being human." Over time, the court began to notice changes too. The queen's decisions started to include considerations that had never been part of her rule before. She paused to listen, to observe, to weigh not only logic but also impact on individuals. Advisors whispered that the human was influencing her, but no one could fully explain how. The human, meanwhile, continued to learn. He observed her daily life, the way she moved, the rituals she followed, and the subtle rules that governed her empire. He learned that small acts of kindness could ripple through the court, that laughter could disarm tension, and that honesty, even when blunt, was respected more than clever manipulation. One evening, as they watched the twin suns set, the human dared to speak his thoughts. "Your empire is amazing, but sometimes maybe it's too perfect, too controlled. Humans make mistakes, and maybe that's not always bad. Sometimes mistakes teach more than perfection ever could." The queen looked at him, her expression unreadable at first, then a faint smile touched her lips. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps the heart has lessons that logic cannot teach." He felt a sudden warmth, not from the suns or the palace, but from the realization that he was making a difference. He was not a ruler, not a warrior, not a conqueror. He was simply human, and in that simplicity he had power. As the days passed, he began to feel a strange sense of belonging. The queen, the court, the palace, they were no longer alien obstacles, but a world he could influence gently, honestly, and with care. He realized that being human here was not just survival, it was transformation. The empire, the queen, and perhaps even himself were changing in ways that no one could have predicted. And somewhere deep within, he knew that the joke he had made weeks ago, the careless words spoken in a moment of nervous humor, was the key. Those words had opened a door, had begun a chain of events that would challenge traditions, test courage, and reveal the true strength of humanity. The human understood now that the empire was not just a place of logic and order. It was a place where a human heart could shine, quietly, persistently, and with unexpected power. And as he looked at the queen, standing silently beside him, he realized that their journey had only just begun. The days had grown warmer in the alien city, though the twin suns never truly set. The human found himself walking beside the queen through the palace gardens more often than not, learning not just about her world, but about her. She was no longer a distant ruler. She was a being capable of curiosity, humor, and reflection. And though the court still whispered and advisors still watched with suspicion, she carried herself with a quiet defiance, and the human began to understand that the bond they shared, even if born from a joke, was becoming something real. He had grown accustomed to the palace, to the rituals, and even to the strange meals that glowed softly on plates, but today felt different. The court had gathered, and a sense of tension filled the halls. Rumors had begun to spread beyond the palace walls, reaching other sectors of the empire. Officials from neighboring regions had sent messages questioning the queen's judgment, a human bound to her by words. Many saw it as a threat to tradition, an insult to centuries of law and order. The human walked beside the queen as she entered the council chamber. The room was grand, filled with floating screens, glowing symbols, and dozens of advisors waiting with expectant faces. He could feel their scrutiny, heavy and unrelenting. For the first time he wondered if perhaps his presence here was dangerous, not to himself, but to the queen. "Your Majesty," an advisor began, voice sharp, "we must discuss the implications of the human's bond. It violates our customs. It threatens the stability of the empire. We cannot allow it to continue unchecked." The queen raised a hand and the room fell silent instantly. Her eyes, those endless galaxies of color, fixed on the advisor. "He is no threat," she said calmly. "His presence has already shown us lessons that logic alone cannot provide. He teaches courage, empathy, and understanding. Do not mistake unfamiliarity for danger." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some advisors glanced at each other, confused. Others nodded, recognizing the firmness in her voice. The human took a deep breath. He had not come to this world to influence politics, yet somehow his honesty, his presence, and even his humor had begun to sway decisions. He realized that being human, being real, was more powerful here than any argument, any law, or any display of force. The council meeting ended with a tense quiet, and the human was escorted back to the gardens by the queen. They walked in silence for a while, the glowing plants casting gentle light on their path. Finally, she spoke. "You see the danger?" she asked softly. "Yes," he admitted, "and I don't want to be the cause of trouble for you. I never expected any of this." She stopped and looked at him, the soft glow of the garden reflecting in her eyes. "It is not your fault. You speak and you act and you feel. That is all. You are human, but your heart, it is unusual and it has power here. Do you understand that?" He nodded slowly. "I think I do, but I also know that I can't stay forever if it hurts you. If you are forced to choose between your duty and me, I'll step away." Her expression softened and she reached out, her hand brushing against his lightly. "No, that will not be necessary. I have made a choice too, not because of your words alone, but because of your being. You have shown me something I never thought I would understand: trust, courage, and honesty." The human's chest tightened. He had not expected her words to affect him so deeply. They continued walking, their steps slow, unhurried. For the first time, he saw her not as a ruler to be approached with caution, but as a person who had chosen to see him as an equal. The political tension, however, did not dissipate. Reports arrived of emissaries demanding explanations, questioning her judgment, and suggesting that the human be removed immediately. The queen gathered him privately and said, "They will challenge us. They will test the bond, but fear will not guide me. Only truth and understanding will." The human took a deep breath. He had never been trained for confrontation on such a scale. Yet he understood something fundamental: his humanity, his ability to speak honestly, to act courageously, to remain true even when fear was present, was exactly what was needed now. The day of the challenge arrived. The council had called a formal assembly to discuss the bond, and emissaries from across the empire attended. The queen and the human entered together. Whispers spread like wind, and all eyes turned toward him. He felt a wave of nervousness, but he steadied himself, reminding himself that he had nothing to hide. He was human, he was honest, and he had the queen's trust. One of the lead emissaries stood, voice sharp. "Your Majesty, the human's presence violates centuries of law. It undermines tradition and risks destabilizing our governance. How can we accept this?" The queen did not hesitate. "His presence does not undermine us. It strengthens us. He shows us qualities we have long ignored: compassion, courage, and understanding. These are not weaknesses, they are strengths." The council erupted into arguments, some advisors shouting, others attempting to mediate. The human stepped forward, his voice steady though his heart raced. "I am not here to overthrow law or tradition," he said. "I am here to learn, to understand, and to help. I make mistakes, I joke, I fail sometimes, but I act honestly and I care about people. That is all I ask, to be seen for who I am and to be allowed to teach by example, not by force." A stunned silence followed. Many had expected him to stumble, to falter, or to plead weakly. Instead, he had spoken with clarity, humility, and courage. The queen watched him, a faint smile on her lips, knowing that his words carried a kind of power her empire had never witnessed before. Slowly, the murmurs subsided. Some advisors nodded, recognizing the truth in what he said. Others remained skeptical, but none could deny the courage it took to stand before the entire council and speak as he had. The human realized in that moment that being human here meant something more than survival. It meant influence, not through force or intellect alone, but through honesty, heart, and bravery. The assembly ended with the queen's final word: "The bond shall remain." It is not a threat, but a testament to the strengths of humanity. We will learn together and we will grow together. Those who cannot see this clearly will adapt, or they will be left behind. The human exhaled quietly, relief washing over him. He had survived the challenge, but more importantly, he had earned a place, not just beside the queen, but in the empire itself. He realized that his presence was changing the court, the advisors, and even the queen herself. In the following days, life in the palace shifted subtly. The human continued to share small lessons of Earth, laughter at small mishaps, kindness to others, and the courage to speak honestly. The queen observed everything, her understanding of humanity deepening. She began to incorporate his insights into her decisions, balancing logic with compassion. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, the human spoke quietly. "I never imagined this would happen. I thought I would just deliver a message and leave. But being here, it feels like I'm part of something bigger." The queen nodded, her eyes reflecting the glow of the twin suns. "You are part of something bigger. You show us that humanity has strength in ways we never imagined. Your presence is not an accident. It is necessary." He smiled faintly, touched by her words. "I never thought a joke could lead to all of this." She glanced at him, a faint, genuine smile on her face. "It was never just a joke, it was an opening, and you have filled it with your being." The human realized then that the bond between them had grown beyond law or words. It was mutual understanding, trust, and respect. He had not intended to form it, yet it had become real, powerful, and transformative. The queen had accepted him, not because of obligation, but because of who he was. Months passed, and the human continued to influence the empire in quiet but meaningful ways. The court, once rigid and suspicious, began to embrace small changes inspired by human behavior. Honesty over manipulation, empathy alongside strategy, courage alongside duty. Other worlds within the empire began to notice, slowly accepting that humans were not just different, they were remarkable. One day, as they watched the city from a balcony high above, the queen spoke softly. "You have changed more than you know. The empire sees your spirit, your heart, and your courage, and I have seen something I never expected to feel: companionship, trust, respect, even affection." The human looked at her, his chest tightening. "I feel the same. I didn't expect any of this, but I don't want it to end. I don't want to leave." She turned to him fully, her eyes filled with emotion she rarely displayed. "Then stay, not because you must, but because you choose, not because of law, but because of choice." He stepped closer, feeling a strange warmth. "I choose," he said simply, "and I will do my best to honor that choice every day." The queen extended her hand, and he took it. In that gesture, they both understood the truth. This was no longer about accidental words or misunderstandings. It was about two beings learning, growing, and discovering that humanity, its courage, its heart, and its spirit, could change even the most rigid and powerful empire. And so, in the glow of the twin suns, high above the alien city, a human and a queen stood side by side. Neither fully ruler nor visitor, neither fully teacher nor student, but equals in a bond that was born from a joke and had grown into something far greater. They had begun a journey that would reshape not only their lives but the future of the empire, simply by embracing honesty, courage, and the extraordinary power of being human.